My dad thinks I'm gay. He said he's going to get rid of my inheritance. Give it away to charity. If I don't find a girlfriend and impregnate her. Yeah, this dude's crazy. Nothing, by my estimation, is as painful as being misunderstood. Being told that you're someone else or something else and made to undertake a path that you're really not cut out for. I came from a family of 4. My parents, my brother, and I. My parents were moralists, which meant they had to do things by the book. You had to eat right, play right, talk right, act right, it all. It was sometimes funny and sometimes boring and just plain crazy. I've always had the desire to be a priest right from my childhood. Yeah, I know it sounds kinda silly that a young man who's never tasted intimacy with a woman would decide to leave a life of celibacy. No child, no wife, no life. You could call me silly now, but the folks in my community thought otherwise. Priests in my community were next to God. They were practically worshipped and carried like eggs. The privileges that they enjoyed was second to none. For a priest to come to your home meant you were favored. That's all rubbish. It was the desire of every parent to have one of their children become a priest. It was the very reason that made my father grant me my wish of becoming a priest. He had my older brother who could continue the family line and live the legacy which my father had passed on, whatever it was. I got into a seminary, a school for intending priests, and of course, it was just boys. The seminary school, in my own view, did more harm than good. Most of the boys there lacked the wits to approach girls. I was one of them. Well, there was not really any ladies around for us to learn from. I was devoted to realizing my dream of becoming a priest, and I was close until my parents suddenly decided one day to withdraw me from the seminary without any reason. I was pained, but when I got to the family house, I saw individuals coming to pay their respects. I saw our church priest leave the compound as I made my entrance, and the words he spoke to me were pointers that I had just lost someone close. It turned out it was my older brother. No wonder my parents showed up suddenly at the seminary without saying a word. I was thrown into mourning for 2 various reasons. My older brother, death, and implications it carried. His death meant I had to kiss my dream of becoming a priest goodbye. Who would continue the family legacy if I refused? After my brother was buried, I tried reasoning with my parents to let me continue to pursue my priesthood. But the way they spoke to me about not wanting to honor my brother, even in death, made me feel like I was responsible for his demise. I just had to resign myself to my fate of getting married and not becoming a priest. My brother died at the age of 27 without any child, although he was preparing to get married at the time. Few weeks after his burial, and my parents began suggesting that I get married. I was 25 years old then, and even though I had accepted the reality that I was going to get married now, it never crossed my mind that it would just be a few weeks after my brother's burial. I felt my parents were the one dishonoring him, as they were talking about marriage just after burying their first son. I did not like the fact that they were trying to move on so quickly. I tried my best to always evade the suggestion as much as I could, but this was not because I lacked an interest in women. I was shy to my bones, an introvert. I'd never really interacted with a woman. I admired them from the shadows, and that was all. I was a creeper. My father soon began harboring the thought that I could be gay. I found it insulting and funny at the same time because as a moralist, he had raised me to be focused. He always discouraged me from getting too close to the opposite sex during teenage tendencies, but now wants me to do the exact opposite, like I could just learn it overnight. He soon arranged a date between I and Trish, the daughter of one of his friends who was of marriageable age. The goal was to get me to bed her and possibly get married. Why parents would force marriage partners on their children in this era, I cannot tell you. It's because of my strict community. I did go on the date, but I screwed up. Of course, it had it coming. Looking back, I realized that the lady in question did give the go-ahead to make a move. She was just anxious to let me bed her, but I was too naive to pick up on the clues. The date ended in frustration for both of us, but besides being frustrated, she was equally angry. She never called me again after that day. My father obviously learned about how the whole thing went. It was then that he confronted me with the whole gay nonsense. I tried convincing my dad that his suspicion was not true in any fashion, but the more I tried making him believe, the more he was convinced that his son was gay. You could imagine the implication for a man who was a moralist living in a religious community that frowned greatly at such. He would not want to take chances. My father quickly barred me from keeping male friends. How absurd that he would think of me as someone other than a man. I thought he was just bluffing until he began dividing off my male friends who came looking for me. I openly voiced out my displeasure with the whole thing, but it only made matters worse. Father gave me an ultimatum to get a lady engaged and equally get her pregnant before my 26th birthday, which would just be in a few months. I knew his plan was to have me get intimate with any lady so he could be a little bit pacified that his only son was, quote, indeed, a man. It sounds funny now, but it didn't back then. I was in a strait. How could I overcome the phobia of ignorance, which prevented me and all the while from shooting my shot at ladies, when my male friends who could help me were now cut off from me? The only option I had left was Rosemary. Rosemary, or May as I called her, she was a maid. And she had been living with us since I was a toddler. She was 30 years old. That's 4 years ahead of me, and she in no way likes me. I vividly remember several instances when she would sneak out of the house just to meet with one of her numerous lovers. I knew that if anyone was going to help me, it was going to be her. We had grown close over the years, and she was in a sense indebted to me when you consider the fact that besides my brother, who is dead now, I'm the only one who had her secret safely tucked away somewhere in my head. May knew the problem and how to solve it. She began building my confidence and teaching me all I needed to know in order to successfully woo the ladies. Before you knew it, I'd crafted my own pickup lines, and it was really effective. But getting the perfect and effective pickup line was one problem. What I would do after that I picked up the ladies, I had no clue. Yeah, I practically had no clue on what to do if my pants were down with a lady. Thankfully, I had May who had it covered. She had her ways of making sure that I did not just understand what she was teaching as regards to sex. She ensured that I became a pro by betting her severely. Well, I at first kicked against the ideas of her tutoring methods, which required me sleeping with her, as I saw her as family. But I had to give in just to ensure that I saved my inheritance, you know. My first experience, oh man, that was an eye-opener. It felt like I had been wasting my life all the previous years in pursuit of celibacy. Now, I was glad that my parents have compelled me to get the dream of becoming a priest. Give that thing up. I'd finally woken up and felt alive. If only the priest had the faintest idea what they've been missing out on, they would renounce their vows with speed. I decided that I was going to cover for lost ground. I was going to regain every bout of pleasure that I've been denying myself all these years. I went wild, buck wild, as fast as I've became a pro. Even I was amazed at the way I started picking up and dropping ladies with ease, left and right. My father was somewhat pleased the day I received a female guest to the house, and he did not make a fuss when he discovered that she had spent the night over. Even though I only introduced her as a friend and not my girlfriend, my father was all the same pleased that I was becoming a man. He soon started developing concerns when I began bringing several girls into the house to spend the night. On one occasion, I had 2 girls spend the night with me at once, and he only got to find out in the morning, to make things worse, when they walked downstairs looking for a cup of orange juice. Well, I hooked up again with his friend's daughter, who I failed to impress the first time when my father arranged the meeting. I could tell she was impressed. Who wouldn't? With May's help, I had changed up my wardrobe, done a really good packaging on my looks. Before long, she gave me the signals she had given the first time, and I was smart enough to know by now what she was doing. So, my father had to confront me when he saw me on various occasions with different girls, including his friend's daughter. He now began encouraging me to pick a girl amongst them and settle down, please. You're not a playboy. And he was canvassing for Trish, his friend's daughter. It was most likely that he knew I was obviously sleeping with every girl he found around me, but I simply told him that I was just keeping them close to observe their characters before committing myself seriously to any of them. I did not bother heeding to my father's advice. My sexual appetite was something that could not be satisfied with one partner alone, and so I knew that marriage was simply not really for me, at least not now. As the time went by, I was beginning to create a name for myself amongst the ladies. You guessed it, Playboy. The news began flying around that the son of the moralist was now highly immoral. The shame was now becoming too much for my father to bear, and I was glad because it served him just right. I was who I had become all because of him. If he never doubted my sexuality, if he never threatened to will my inheritance to charity, I would never have turned out to be the sexual predator who was causing him shame. My father steadily grew impatient, waiting for me to straighten out and just pick a wife. And so, out of frustration, he began compelling me to marry his friend's daughter, Trish. Well, let me tell you, that was really stupid of him. The shame which I was already bringing on him and the family's name was a result of him trying to run my life, and it was clear that he had not learned his lesson. So, I got Trish engaged, but I felt pity for her, because she was probably going to get frustrated somewhere along the lines, as I was not being tied down to just one woman. I just hoped, for her sake though, that the problem did not start sooner than expected. My father was all out of haste in the process of getting us married, and when it became news, both families found out Trish was pregnant. My father used it as an opportunity to set up marriage. Preparations were going on for the marriage between Trish and I, but that did not stop me from going after women, like the top player I was now. Dad, of course, knew that my escapades did not recline. As a matter of fact, they've only heightened. But my dad felt it was going to die down once I tied the knot with Trish. How mistaken he was. Because marriage is never really an antidote to sexual recklessness. It only exposes it. The wedding day finally came, and most of the high-profile people in this society were here. It's always been customary to have the groom and congregation with the expectation for the bride, but the reverse was the case in my turn. I drove down to the church from the hotel where I spent the night with the ladies, finally arrived at the wedding venue, and the ceremony kicked off. We were at the point of exchanging our vows when the lady walked in with pregnancy that she claimed was mine. The whole place broke out in pandemonium. Among everyone who was pained and embarrassed, I only felt pity for Trish. No one else, not even my father, gave sympathy from me. I was sorry for Trish because no woman should have to go through such an embarrassment on the biggest and best day of her life. Trish had it coming, though. I'd already a reputation for my insatiable lust for women, so Trish must have heard about it. The fact that she chose to go ahead marrying me meant that she was willing to accept the baggage that I came with. So, I acknowledged there and then to have been slept with the pregnant lady weeks back. But I wasn't sure the child was mine. At least I would have to wait for the child to be born so that I could carry out a DNA test. The wedding was called off nonetheless, and my father bowed his head in shame as we all walked home. He thought it was the worst he would see, but we were greeted by a lady and her daughter of 18 years, who claimed that her daughter's 3-week pregnancy was mine. My mother collapsed when I equally acknowledged to have slept with the young girl some time ago, and there was every possibility that yes, this child was also mine, as I was the first person she's been with. My father had to get a grip of himself before he died of a heart attack. He began cursing and wishing that I was the one who had died in place of my brother. I just kept quiet because if they knew the full extent of my escapades, they would literally have a heart attack. They only saw 2 ladies out of maybe 50. They did not even know that May, who had schooled me in the act of immorality, had aborted a pregnancy from me 2 months ago. Yeah, We were having sex even though I was engaged at the time. My family was divided for a while till Mom got back from the hospital where she's been attending. I moved out of the house because I was sure they needed time away from my troubles. Meanwhile, I reached out to Trish to straighten things out between us and clear the air. After the whole thing happened, we were not going to get married, that's for sure. Who would want to marry someone who's had several ladies pregnant from him? Nevertheless, we could be good friends, maybe friends with benefits. Well, she was reluctant at first to even give me a listening ear, but after much persistence, she finally heard me out and decided to forgive me, after she's learned that I was pushed into the lifestyle by my father. I finally decided to return home when I got broke, and even though my father was adamant to receive me, my mother had eagerly anticipated my return. I sat my parents down and told them that it was all their fault, my father especially. Even though they had tried their best to shield me, they went about the whole thing the wrong way. They had put their self-desire to see the family line prolonged, and in the bid to ensure that, they, my father more especially, drove me into a lifestyle of immorality. I did apologize for bringing shame to us, even though that did not mean I was going to settle down with any woman anytime soon. I was still going to have fun, with the difference being that I would try to avoid any more unwanted pregnancies. My father, with time, overlooked my mess-up. We became a happy family once again, after all. When you look at the bright side of things, I've proven to my parents that I was not gay. And I just ensured the continuity of our family. I gave them so many grandchildren. Looks like the family line will live on, Father. Okay, guys, so I just have to read this comment because I thought it was kind of funny. I'll be honest with you, I did not see that 180-degree switch up. OP went from, "Oh, sir, I'll have your daughter home at 7 p.m." to, "Hey, your daughter now calls me daddy, bro." I was rooting for OP at first, but then I think he got very carried away and just became a giant tool. I was hoping him having so many kids at once teaches him about his mistakes, but based on his final comment about giving his father all the heirs he could ever want, not going to lie, it made me chuckle, but also was just another huge red flag. I do feel horrible for Trish though, as she seems like a giant doormat. Anyways, great story, OP, thanks for sharing. Guys, I have to ask you one question. What do you think of this story? Is OP just a giant tool, or was he forced in this position by his father? Thank you so much for joining in, guys. I hope each and every one of you have an amazing day. And also, just a little thing to add. I started a new Instagram channel. You can find the link down below in the description. It's a little behind-the-scenes look into Mr. Reddito's day-to-day, green screen pictures, 60-second stories, reels, you name it. So check that out and have an amazing day.